Hi, everybody, and welcome. We are here today. I'm here with Esperanza Hope Snyder, and we are here to celebrate the release of Orange Wine by Esperanza, which came out today. This is the second book out from my imprint, Mareas, and we have our launch party in a couple of weeks in New York, but we wanted to take today to actually celebrate the release of this book that Esperanza has been working on for a very long time. And I have joined her on this journey more recently. And today we're going to just sit down with you all, answer any questions you have, talk a little bit about her journey to publishing and who she is and how she got to this story. And I'm super excited to be here with you guys and with you, Esperanza. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Maddie. It's been such a pleasure to work with you and to see Orange Wine come to life in such a wonderful manner with Bindery Books and the whole team. I'm just delighted to be here and I'm very happy to celebrate with you.
I asked you this off camera before we joined, but for for the purpose of everybody else hearing, how has today been? How has the whole release day gone? And what is the reality like of having worked on this for so long and today it's finally out?
Well, part of it, as I know you understand, is surreal, right? It feels surreal because you get to this moment and then, wow, it's here, it's out. And so I've been very fortunate because I felt a lot of support. I received some wonderful messages from the bindery team, from friends, from family. So I've been living Orange Wine today all day long, and I've been talking about it and I've been celebrating it. So it's actually been a lovely day for me, and I appreciate. This is a perfect way to end it with this conversation and celebration. I couldn't think of a better way. So I'm thrilled.
We've
Great.
got a lot of friends in the chat already saying hello and saying congratulations to you on your publication. So I'm glad we could spend this time together as well. And, I guess this is going to be a broad question, but I think for everybody watching and everybody who has heard about Orange Wine but are maybe meeting you for the first time, you have a very interesting history and background, and you were born in Colombia, you've lived in Italy, you've lived in the United States. So can you give us just like, the the little summary of your bio? Who is Esperanza?
Esperanza is a person who was born in Colombia, grew up in Colombia, spent her childhood in Colombia. I spent my childhood in Colombia, went to school in Colombia during my teenage years, early teenage years, and then moved to the States. My father was American, my mother Colombian. And then came to the States and was here for several years and went to Spain and Italy. Then I was in a PhD program at Johns Hopkins and I went to learn Italian in order to study comparative literature. Fell in love with the country and stayed for a very long time. And still ended up completing my PhD over in England, just around the corner. I mean, it was really. And so there was an adventure there as well. I was pregnant with my eldest child when I ended up traveling to Manchester to talk to someone over there about my completing my PhD. And one of the professors I met actually looked me straight in the eye and didn't laugh. And he was very serious and he said, "I think you could do it. I'd like to help you." And I ended up with him. And it so happens that he was married to a Colombian woman. It was just a coincidence. I just walked into that department. But anyway, long story short, then I lived in Italy for many years and in England, completed the PhD, and then came back to the States and ended up working full time as a professor of languages, coordinator of modern languages. And that's when I started, I thought it was time to focus on Orange Wine. But before that, I did get married a couple of times, and I did have two children. So,
You've mentioned, your PhD and going into becoming a professor, going into academia, and I think it's such an interesting part of, your path. Ultimately, as a poet and a writer, and now a published novelist, what led you to academia, and what led you away? Like, what was that kind of decision making in that journey?
so what led me to academia? It started in Colombia when I fell in love with literature because of my grandfather. who used to recite poems to us and had us memorize them as well. And I just developed this passion for poetry, and I loved it. And it was easy. It was easy to memorize the poems, and so I took it from my childhood. Then majored in English literature at William and Mary because I liked reading. I loved reading, like you. We've had these conversations before. I loved reading. I loved reading stories. I loved writing as well, and it came easily to me. So I thought I'm just going to study English. But then once I had my undergraduate, it was I had to think about what to do next, and so a graduate degree seemed. And in the meantime, after I graduated from William and Mary, I did get married, and so I thought, okay, what should I be doing now? I couldn't see myself doing anything else other than studying literature. At this time, I wanted to study Latin American literature because I met a professor at GW who was fabulous. So I connected with her, and now she was a specialist in Don Quixote. So that's why I ended up studying Don Quixote de la Mancha. But so I was always in love with literature. It was my passion. And so I went through the whole gamut. And because of this professor, Professor Azar, I went to Hopkins. She led me. She was a Hopkins graduate. And so it was my path to be a professor, to make a living. And also, to be honest with you, Mari, I mean, it's prestigious. You know, I was demonstrating that I was capable of playing that game, the
Yeah.
academic game, and sitting around the table with all these people and discussing literary theory. But I loved novels. I loved the words more than the criticism.
Mm.
So that's how I ended up in academia, and it proved to be actually an excellent career because I did throughout all the years. I did complete the PhD, and I did end up teaching, and I left as an associate tenured professor when I left the field. So.
Uh, People are loving that you said I got married a couple of times. Very iconic,
Well,
very chic.
three times, three times, and twice to the same person, by the way. But
Wait.
that's going
Um,
to be in the next book.
yeah,
So
yeah,
let's go to the
yeah.
next.
That's a follow up. I think you mentioned too, and we've talked about this a lot because for me, when I read your work, there were kind of two things to me that immediately stood out. One was that it reminded me of my favorite sort of works that I grew up reading. Specifically, it reminded me of like Water for Chocolate. There was something about that reading experience that, like, just the language and the way that you captured the experience just matched really well. And then it also reminded me of my grandmother and my grandparents' story and the way that they used to tell us about, the things that they experienced in the Dominican Republic. And I remember listening to my grandma talking about being my grandfather's mistress and running away from home and like thinking, oh my goodness, like the lives that they led.
Right.
And Orange Wine is inspired by your grandparents. So why this story? What was like the initial thing that you decided you wanted to write about your grandparents?
Well, there were two things. One, well, three actually. I wanted to capture the more time that passed as I grew up and I got married and had children. I understood better what an interesting upbringing I had had and what a strange world that had been, and a beautiful world in many ways. But so I wanted to capture that world, and I wanted to capture it for my children because how could I talk about that world to them without actually giving them some pictures, some descriptions, some experiences, other than taking them there, because my grandparents had both passed away. That
Hmm.
was one. The other one was the orange wine, because all of a sudden I realized as an adult that it was a bit unusual that my grandfather used to serve orange wine in Bogota, Colombia, with our meals, and he made it, and it was very bitter. So, but it became our tradition. There was orange wine at the table all the time, and then I realized that was very unusual. And the third thing was wanted to understand my grandmother and the women in the family. So my grandmother was a very sweet woman, and she was kind of a mystery to me in many ways. And I understood as I got older what her situation was. She lived at the beginning of the 20th century. She had limited choices. How did she live her life? What were her aspirations? She used to play the guitar, from what I had been told, and to sing, but how could she pursue a career in the arts? And so it was me delving also into her life and trying to understand it. That's what inspired me.
Yeah, I think that if for people, we have people in the chat who have already read Orange Wine, who are in the middle, started today. And I think it's really interesting because that question about getting into like Inés's decisions and why she does what she does is like a big part of the reaction to this book. There are people who get her and there are people who don't get her, and so it's like really interesting to hear that part of that is like where you approached it from. Like you knew the story of your grandma, but like really what would it mean to have lived that set of circumstances? And obviously you're also imagining, you're adding things in and you're making it a novel, so it becomes its own thing. So how, I don't know, I guess I'm curious, how do you view Inés? How would you describe Inés and her set of choices?
The first thing I would say, and this goes with what the readers are saying, is she's misunderstood. She's misunderstood. She's misunderstood because on the one hand, she's a lovely. When I met my grandmother, obviously, she wasn't the incredibly gorgeous woman that made my grandfather just like go crazy. And who had been married to someone else before, which at the time, in a Catholic country, in Colombia, was not an easy thing to deal with. So when I met her, she was a grandmother, and she was very sweet, and she was very spiritual, and she was kind. So that was the Inés I met. But then I would hear about her stories, and I would hear about her playing the guitar, and I knew she had been married to this bad boy guy, and had children with him, and all these things that are in the novel. And I was like, then I'd hear opinions about, oh, she's not strong, like she doesn't make strong choices. And I'm thinking, well, why doesn't she?
Hmm.
Why doesn't she make those strong choices? Because, in my opinion, she's limited by the time, and she's limited by her gender. So even if she came from a wealthy family that came from Spain, and they were all incredible and sophisticated, she married. Okay, so she married the bad guy, and this is something that I do want to clarify. He's a bad boy, Alessandro. And you know what I want to say to you readers who think this: do you have a friend who maybe has made a bad choice with the guy because they just fall head over heels in love with this person, and this person is not good for them? Or
Yeah.
has it happened to you? And
Yeah.
then getting out of it is a little bit difficult at the beginning of the 20th century. It's easier now, but there's still heartache. So that's who Inés is, a misunderstood, a woman who is misunderstood, who also, in my opinion, did not get to reach her full potential due to her circumstances, which of course I do take care of in the novel.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
think it's like, we have all been there, the set of choices that you make that maybe you don't see as clearly, the people around you see as clearly, and then extricating yourself is not simple. It's not the moment of, the matter of just like, oh, well, I made a mistake, let's move on. It takes effort, it takes time, and she is limited by all of these things. And I think in a lot of ways, Inés is also, we see the way that her outside circumstances, the time, the society structure, how people view her gender, also impacts her and what she thinks she is capable of. Because a lot of times she brings herself back, right, into
Mhm.
like, well, this is what I should be doing. This is
Right.
what everybody else wants me to do. And so it's difficult for her even to like, kind of bring that out of her mind to realize her full potential and see what she could be. And I think that those probably are the most frustrating points as people are reading, but it is also the stuff that is the most true to life. If you hear kind of one story about yourself for your entire life, it's hard to like start to believe a different kind of story about yourself.
That's right. Even to this day.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
I mentioned like Water for Chocolate and it, being this book reminding me of that book, but I'm curious about, for you, who are your literary influences for this book? And then just generally, who are, the authors that you grew up reading? Who are you reading now? Who are the people that you look up to?
So also, like Water for Chocolate is a book I really enjoyed very, very much. And I saw, when I read it, I thought, oh, this I see what Laura Esquivel is capturing here, and this is something that really resonated with me. Um, I love Elena Ferrante. I've read her, the four books, My Brilliant Friend, and so on.
Mhm.
And partly the connection also for me was I lived in Italy for over 9 years, and anyway, my dissertation is about Naples and so on. So I'm familiar with those worlds, and but I loved her way of telling the story and the women's role in that story. So Isabel Allende, The House of the Spirits, was my favorite novel by her, and that really resonated with me. As a matter of fact, I used to teach it as a professor. I used to teach The House of the Spirits, and had them watch the film as well. I really, really thought that was an excellent novel. Of course, Gabriel Garcia Marquez was part of my bread and butter. I mean, 100 Years of Solitude, and El Coronel no tiene quien le escriba, the Autumn of the Patriarch, all that. So I grew up reading those, and I read them and loved them. As a child, though, Alfonsina Storni was a great influence. She was a poet, and she was born in Switzerland but grew up in Argentina, and she was my grandfather's one of his favorite poets. I understand now how unusual that is, because she was a woman, and also she was a single mother at the time. And she unfortunately committed suicide. So she had a very tragic story, but she was incredibly gifted as a poet. And so I recited her poems from memory because of my grandfather. Although I didn't know her tragic story at the time, she had some really great poems that were actually very light and funny. So she was a great influence. Cervantes, of course. Don Quixote, I mean, my grandfather read it. And then when I went to graduate school, I ended up with this professor who was obsessed with Don Quixote. I'm telling you, we used to have like 4-hour seminars about Don Quixote. And I really actually fell in love with Don Quixote, which is obviously, we all know, it's a very thick book and you really have to get into it. But I love Don Quixote. Dostoevsky. I mean, there's some I'm widely read in many different areas, but Dostoevsky, love Dostoevsky with that. You can see, and some of their angst and so on, and the existential. But now, for instance, I'm reading all kinds of novels because I'm interested in what is. I like Sally Rooney's books. I've been enjoyed. I read Anne Hood's book about the stolen child, which actually takes place partly in Italy. So I'm reading a lot of contemporary fiction as well, because I'm curious about what's being written, and I'm enjoying it actually very much. So yeah, and I love reading in Italian when I can, in Spanish when I can as well. So.
You're also a poet. You have a collection of poetry come out before. This is your debut novel. What is the meaningful difference either for you or in your approach in terms of how you went about writing a novel versus how you approach your poetry?
So with the poetry, that's an excellent question, by the way. With the poetry, of course, we know the poem is limited by the form, right, and the length and so on. It's a very different format. Um, I had to be very disciplined, and I like to tell stories. So many of my poems actually end up being narrative. I mean, they've been defined as lyrical as well, but I'm always telling a story in each poem. I don't. My every poem has a description of an experience or a person or a situation, and that's what I can do in the novel, where I don't have a limit of lines I don't have to be as succinct as I have to be with the poem. But writing poetry really prepared me for writing Orange Wine in the way that it was written, which it just happened organically. But now I am aware of the journey and how writing poetry, having to choose your words carefully, having to use punctuation carefully, your images, we have a few words, unless it's a prose poem and it's, or a whole book of a poem or something. It's a discipline that really, I think, helped me very much in my descriptions as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
for the novel.
I think this is one of my favorite features of the novel is that it so often you tell us something, right? This happened to Inés, or whatever it might be, but you don't tell us necessarily how to feel. And I think that that is it's not like this happened and it was very sad. And I think that telling us how to feel is a style that is feels more modern, that happens a lot more in books recently. And I personally, I love this like negative space where you're just kind of recounting and we, the reader, get to go, oh, I think that's really sad, and we get to kind of put that in. And I imagine that some of that, just like you said, came organically from knowing how to have like that economy, right? Of having only certain amount of words to kind of go in there and tell the story that you're telling. And I think that you read this and then you hear, oh, Esperanza is a poet, and you go, yeah, okay, that it comes across.
I'm glad. Yeah. And
Um, I am also very curious. We get sort of you publish a book, and once it's out of your hands, right?
mhm.
It's out. It belongs to the readers now, and their interpretation is in their experience kind of goes forward from there. But is there anything that, as people are reading, that you hope that they take away, or that you wish is like an impact that the story could have?
Well, and what you just said made me think about, when you say giving birth to an idea or giving birth to a book, and writing the book and sending it out into the world is like having a child, in my experience, and sending my children out into the world, and they go to school and they meet all these teachers, and everybody has a different opinion, and they get raised in the world, just like I feel orange wine was taken off. I gave birth, and now it's out in the world. And everybody has something. Whoever has something to say about it, and guide it in one way or another. What I would like, uh, yes, I mean, I'm feel a great ambition for this novel, not only because it took me over 20 years to write, as we have talked about before, but because it's what I can do. it's
Mm,
it's what I can do. I can tell this story. This is a story I can tell, and this is the one thing that I know I can do, uh, that is very important to me, because to be able to share a little piece of that world with readers, whether or not they like that world, whether or not they agree with it, means everything to me. To know that someone takes the time, especially in today's day and age where we're so rushed to do everything, to see people are reading, to see that people are making the time for my work, the work that I dedicated so much time, love, and devotion to, that means everything in the world to me, is humbling, and I really appreciate it. That's the first thing I want to say. Readers, thank you. You don't have to love orange wine, but the fact that you're reading it, the fact that you have a strong opinion about it, it warms my heart. So I love that. This dialogue. All of a sudden, like Inés and Regulo, they're out there in the world. And Alessandro, that, you know what?
the
They're
bad
out,
boy.
yeah, that bad boy, they're out there in the world. And it just warms my heart to see that, hear people talk about them like real people.
Mm,
So I feel my job has been done in that sense. I would like people to yeah, to think about Inés. I mean, obviously, I love travel, other cultures, the food, the wine, the love, and the sadness as well. But I think, if you can take some time out of your day and you read the book, and it inspires something in you, a feeling, in an intellectual response, whatever it is, that's what I want. I don't want you to be indifferent.
yes,
I want, yeah.
that is exactly like what I think probably part of the reason that we match so well, and that this partnership has been great, is that is like my number one goal too with like the books that I'm picking. Is I think that when I started, I was like looking for a book, and I was thinking so much about, will people like this, and I had to like step back and be like, I can't control actually who's gonna like this or
Right.
not, but I want to pick books where people aren't indifferent, where there is like a reaction there. There's like things that you can talk about and things that you can pull apart. And I felt that way with Orange Wine for sure. Even just from the fact of, like you said, like Inés talking about her like a real person, dissecting her decisions and like
Right.
thinking about everything that she goes through, like that was the thing that I was here that I was like, okay, love it or, don't love it. I think people will read this and have a reaction. And I think so, you did that very well.
Thank you. So the dialogue, sparking a dialogue. That's what I want people. I want people to think about Inés and then make up their own minds about her. Give her a chance.
You mentioned traveling too, and I'm not gonna, no spoilers for people who haven't had a chance to read it, just came out, but there is a portion in this book where after, Ines lives kind of a sheltered life for a while, and within the confines that we've talked about in terms of like society and duty and bad decisions that she's made. But there is a portion of this book where she just gets to travel and experience, and it feels like a little break in this portion of the book where you're just kind of watching her experience the world, and you're also getting to see people experience Ines and like see her for who she is. And I just found that like such an interesting portion of the book, even as she kind of goes through that, and you realize though that even after that there's still more that she has to go through and unpack and learn and live. But I love that we got that little break there where she got to experience the world and travel. So were you pulling from places that you have visited that you loved? Like, what was the thinking around that?
Well, I mean, I did go to Florence uh, during my PhD program at Hopkins, and I did stay 9 years. So that, no, no spoilers. Spoiler alert. But yes, I was, and there were other places that are discussed in the novel where I have spent considerable time and where I have learned and loved and lived and discovered and explored. And I just think that travel is the other school, other than than going to quote unquote school and reading. Travel is your other education, and it's so important to me, to my life, which was my contribution to the book, as far as the travel and how important and significant it is, and how it has changed my life and Ines's life, of course. And so, yeah, and all those experiences described there are experiences that I myself have had with the
And
travel.
you also mentioned that, you kind of been working on this for 20 years on and off. And obviously, during that time, you've also lived a very full life. You've traveled, you've done poetry, you've done, writing has taken you in other directions. So, what were those 20 years like? How did the story start? What were like the different iterations how did Orange Wine start? And, where we finally got here in this format?
How did it start? Well, it started when I had children, which is for me has been a life changing experience. And so living in the States and thinking, okay, this is one half of my life, but there's so much they don't know. So how do I tell them about that life? And I didn't think that the poetry, would do it, even though my kids were subjected to poetry from an early age. Anyway, one time in school when I was visiting my son's school and I read a poem, and then I looked at the kids. It was like fourth grade or fifth grade, and they looked so sad. I had chosen a poem that I thought would be great. It was about a doll, but
Mm.
clearly it was not. It was sad, and so I saw sad faces. So I stopped and I skipped the stanza, right? And then my son raises his hand and he says, "You didn't finish the poem." And another kid says, "How do you know?" And he said, "Because I've heard it so many times." So I figured, okay, so I've done it with the poetry to my kids. Now what can I do? And I said, I want to tell the story of what it was like in Colombia. So it was when I was pregnant, actually, with this son that I just mentioned. I have 3 children, and I started writing it, and I was teaching full time, and I was commuting, and I thought, I'm just going to start writing the novel. And that's when I started, and I started it in the third person, but it just wasn't working for me. So then I changed that, and I started writing it in the first person, and that was a long time ago, 1997, to be more precise. And then, of course, I was teaching full time. I was running a language program at the university, and I was commuting, and so it was a slow trip, and then a slow journey. And I also had another child after that, my third child. So, yeah, so I would put it away, and then I would bring it out again, and then I finished it by about 2002, and that's when I took it to the Bread Love Writers Conference. That was my first conference, and I took this novel, and then went back to poetry after the conference, but I still had the novel. And a couple of agents looked at it, and they were like, "Ah, I'm interested, but this Inés character, she's a little bit like, she should be making like be a modern woman basically,
Mm,
and I was like,
mm.
no, because that's not who she was. And so I went through that whole period, and still rewriting and still polishing the story and so on. And then it gets us to here, to now, to you being brilliant, who saw, I mean, that was, you were talking before, Mari, about you were saying the part you like about the travel and how she travels. And you and I worked together, and you made suggestions, and you said, I want more about Inés and Regulo in the second part. You don't get enough. And that was part of the whole traveling and adding more experiences and adventures and so on and so forth. So it brought me to now, and it brought me to a place where I actually felt great about it, because I was able to add, to keep the sadness, of course, and the difficulties, but at the same time to add the travel, the love, the passion, all the other things that balance it more. Hmm.
And I mean, I think it's a wonderful story, your story of publishing. I mean, everything works out. We we made it to a good place. I know
Yes,
probably when you were in the thick of 20 years of working on this, right? It's a different experience than looking back and being like, okay, we made it. But I just think there's something so special about thinking like of a story that's been slow cooked that way, and that like really there's been a lot of time and effort and energy that went into it.
oh, and that it came to the right home, found by the right person. We've talked about this before also, because I had a couple of people who said, I'm interested if you do this or change that or the other. And fortunately, I said no, no, I will not do that. I'm waiting for Mari bindery books. But no, I had faith, I believed. And but it was hard, but
I was, it must have been because I feel like that for a lot of people, you get like an offer, or, and it's easier to like, okay, I'll make the changes to accept, especially if this is, you've been working on it for a long time.
right.
So I admire that you were like, no, I'm not going to make those changes. Like, I'm going to wait.
Yeah. And also Madison was very helpful in that respect, because he read it and he said he loved it. I mean, he was like, yes, yes, we're going to send this out. So that was very helpful as well. And also I got rejections,
Mm, yeah.
just so everybody knows, I got rejected many times, and here I am. So don't give up. I'm happy to be here. I'm telling you, things happen for a reason,
Yes.
and that's part of what Ines, in this whole manifestation and believing and all that. It's happened in my life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know I told the story before too to to people on social media, but it really does. I honestly feel that like part of the best thing about Bindery has been these partnerships where it's like I don't know, the author kind of gets a person to be there with them through the process. I made this. You talked about birthing the book and it kind of being out in the world, and this book is your baby, and I feel like the proud aunt in a lot of ways, where it's
Mhm.
like, I also get to like experience and cheer it on. And so like this partnership has been one of the best things about going through this experience. And especially Esperanza, like when we met, I think that we both had that moment where we were talking and it
Yes.
was just like that. Oh, that instant connection, that instant,
Yes.
like, okay, this is going to work. And, we've met in person and we were
Yeah.
cracking up and having a great time. And
Yeah.
every time we've been able to talk about this book, I think it was just, like you said, meant to be in terms of like bringing the two of us together. And I'm so like proud and honored that I got to be the one to work with this book. And truly, just because it's been such a journey for you and such a beautiful story behind the story, and I'm just a little portion of it, but I'm super happy and proud to be here.
Oh, but it's thanks to you that we're here tonight, and all your efforts and Bindery's efforts. I'm just so, it just feels like coming home. It feels like coming home. And I have to say that the one thing also that I've thought about, that I haven't said before, is that it's, in the environment of writing and this and that and the other, it's not easy. It's very difficult. um, you see it with me, and it's happened to me. And I don't know, I don't have specific advice to give people other than don't give up, and keep doing what you're doing, which we've talked about before as well. But I think it's not taking things for granted.
Mm.
It's a lovely natural coming together to celebrate a work of art, if I might call my book a work of art.
Of course.
But you and bindery, and it's just like absolutely wonderful in this day and age, and with everything going on in the world. This just brightens my day
Yeah,
and
to
my
have
life.
this little pocket, right, where you
Yeah,
can talk with other people who love stories and, like you said, have this work that we can discuss and all of that. It really does just kind of remind you of some of the things in all of the bad that are good, right? That we can
exactly.
still kind of gather around and connect over and all of that.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
I know this just came out today. And so we've got a still, a couple weeks here of promoting and, just getting the word out and doing all we can to make sure that she is as successful as she can be. But I'm going to ask you kind of a forward looking question here. Are you working on anything new? Orange wine is out there. You did it. So what's
Yeah.
next?
Well, I am working on, in the style of Elena Ferrante.
Uh-huh.
I'm working, inspired by her, I'm working on the second volume, continuation of Inés's and Regulo's story, volume 2, with children, and so forth. Yeah, Alba's story. Yeah, so I've already started working on that, and I'm moving forward with that. Yeah, so.
That's so exciting. I know that there are people who already read who would be like thrilled to hear that. I love like a literary work that is serialized. You don't see that a lot in
Mhm.
sort of like the literary space. So that's really, really interesting. We have another a question from the chat. So it says, how do you find inspiration for such descriptive imagery when some of these memories you are drawing from are from your childhood? Has traveling been able to revitalize them?
That's a great question. Traveling, yes, yes, and reading,
Mm.
both, because reading, of course, I've been thinking about Proust in the last 5 minutes because of the remembrance of things past, and capturing those experiences. And memory is a very interesting thing, and we all know it, and it just works in such a magical way. So you could have three people in the room who went through the same experience, and they'll each remember it differently or have different highlights about it. So my childhood, in many ways, well, number one, it was stamped in my memory just because of the strangeness of some of the people.
Mm.
But So that will always stay with me, and also it is tied to my native language.
Mm.
So I think when you have those two things, that keeps it, or my first language, I would say. But anyway, so that's part of it, the language, the childhood, but also the reading is really what helps me make those connections and remember and go back there and search and research, like in a big I don't know, closet full of treasures.
Mm.
So
And are you still writing poetry as well?
I have a book of poetry coming out in 2026, titled "Mostly Blooming," but at present. I'm writing, "Memory in the Wine" is the working title.
Aw.
So
And how's it been like kind of going back into this world that you created and these revisiting these characters? Is it different writing from a different perspective of the story?
it's actually been a lot of fun. Well, and also, I said, okay, this is it. This is what's going to happen. And then I thought, no, 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 no. That's not how Inés and Regulo would do it. So I had to backtrack. And speaking of places, I mean, it's a very specific place, and I'm delving deeply into it. I'll just say, like, the city of Cartagena,
Mm.
Cartagena in Colombia, which is a beautiful city, historic city, where there happens to be a wedding. I will say no more. But so I'm really getting into that, and so then I'm getting into the chef, and I'm getting into the mansion. I'm getting into the beautiful part of celebrating a love, knowing that there will be heartbreak, because my friends, we all know life has its ups and downs. It can't be perfect. People make us suffer. So that will be later. But right now, we're like at the wedding reception, and it's fabulous. So I'm
uh,
having fun.
somehow you've already sold copies of this book that you're writing.
I
Okay.
love you guys. I love you.
We have another question, a very important question. Do you have a favorite or standout wine you've experienced in your travels?
That's an excellent question. Well, I would say, I would have to say Brunello di Montalcino is a wine that I really, really loved. I know I experienced a lot of Italian wines, and I was fortunate enough to go to Montalcino itself, to the town, and go to a winery there and experience their wine, and it was divine, divine. But there are great Rioja wines. Ribera del Duero is excellent as well. The Spanish wines, what happens with the Spanish wines is that you actually do have to go to Spain to experience the best wines, Spanish wines. And a lot of them don't get exported. But I had some in Leon that I loved. And also, I've been to France, to the Champagne region. I don't drink champagne every day or anything like that. But it's kind of cool to go to the Champagne museum and experience champagne in France. So, to answer your question, it's tied obviously to the place and the experience in the moment,
Mhm.
as you can imagine. But the Brunello di Montalcino would definitely be the one that I would say. But
Are
thank you
there
for that question. Yeah.
are there any places that you haven't traveled to yet that are still kind of on your list to experience?
Oh, there are so many. I mean, so many, so many. I would like to go to Istanbul. I haven't been to Istanbul.
Mhm.
I would like to go. I would like to go to India at some point as well. China, Japan. Yeah, I would leave tomorrow. I love to travel. Yeah.
Everybody go buy a copy. So
Please buy copies so I can travel and write about it. I promise I'll write books about it.
yeah. You'll give us something in return.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have a particular American writer in mind for the characters who Inés and Regulo encounter? Oh, okay. So in the book, they do encounter.
Can I say the name, Mari? Am I allowed to say the writer I was thinking of?
I think so. Yeah.
Ernest Hemingway,
Yeah.
because he used to go to that particular restaurant. I won't, no, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, that used to be his favorite place to hang out, and I've been to that restaurant and I love it. I mean, it's an experience to go to that restaurant, and so therefore I wanted to bring my experience of being there with Inés and Regulo, encountering him.
This is a really fun part, a funny part of the whole experience in editing, because you had some references there to real authors and poetry in there as well. And so
Hmm.
once we were going through the editing process, there was that moment where I was like, well, wait, we have to, figure out the permissions and what we can include and what we can say and can't say. So there was a little bit of negotiation there that I thought was really interesting that I honestly didn't really think about when I had first read your manuscript, but the editors immediately flagged of like,
Yeah.
hold on a second.
You cannot go around, yeah, mentioning, because of the public domain and all that, and different, estate, the Hemingway estate, and so on. But yes,
And that was
absolutely.
that was this person's guess. So
Ah,
you did a
good
good
guess, Sarah. Good
job.
guess. Good guess.
Okay. When will you write an autobiography about your fascinating life living in Italy, marrying the same man twice? We want to read it.
Well, that's an excellent question, Stephen. Thank you. Um, that would probably come volume 3 of this trilogy, would be
Oh,
based on. So it would be we have Ines and Regulo, then we have Alba, their daughter, who
mhm.
goes around the world and gets into trouble, as we expect, and then she has a perfect child. A
A
perfect child. Just
beautiful.
try to take a guess.
who never made any mistakes in her life ever.
No, 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 no. She has a daughter who's very curious, and that would be the third one. And that's I'm going to include many, many of my personal, experiences in that third volume. That's what I was thinking. But see, I have to tell Alba's story before I jump to mine. But yeah, you read my mind, Stephen, when you asked that question, because that's what I would like to do.
That's awesome. And would you, is the plan to stop it there? Do one of your daughters have to worry that you're going to write about their lives as
I
well?
can't do that one. I can't. Maddie, I want to have a relationship with my daughters and with my son. You know, I can't do it. If,
We'll have to
you
stop
know,
with you.
yeah, they have to write their own story. It's already hard enough sometimes, I'm sure, having a mother who writes all kinds of stuff, you know. So I think, yeah, I'll start with my story and then it's up to them.
And then they got to carry the torch.
That's right. That's right.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about or share? This is something I'm super curious about with like all my authors. So obviously, you wrote the book, you edited the book, you went through multiple rounds of edits. Have you read the book again, like in its final form? And do you ever, like, I don't know, is it kind of like done now in your mind? Will you ever come back and reread Orange Wine?
Okay, so that's also an excellent question. I haven't read it in the last week, but what was interesting to me was when it was submitted to Bindery, it was complete. It was finished in my estimate and Madison's as well. And then, of course, after the conversations with you, where I was asked to add more and so on, then of course I ended up rereading it, what I had written to add more to it. So that was the reading, and then through the edits. But now what's interesting is that with the audio that's coming
Mhm.
out, and we got the sample, and I started listening to it, and I was like, wow, I have to read this again, especially because I'm writing volume two, and
Yeah.
I've actually had to go back because, of course, the telling of the narrative, right? So the answer is yes, but not as a reader who sits down from page 1 to 300.
Mhm.
More as a reader who goes and looks at this chapter, and. But I would actually like to do it again. But what's interesting is the distance, and I'll give you an example. So the quote, beauty like love must have its caretakers. I was like, oh, that's, pardon me for saying this, but I said, that's a really cool line. Somebody in Bindery came up with it because, one of the team came up with it to tell you. And then, of course, I was wrong. I wrote it. I, my daughter asked me, she said, this is really a great line. Did you write it? I said, let me see. Well, it's so many words in the book. And so,
Yeah.
and so then I went back and searched and I said, I wrote it. So it was me. It's my line. Nobody plagiarized it. So anyway, so it's almost like the spirit, the inspiration takes over. I know writers talk about this when they sit down to write and something else takes over them.
Mhm.
You call it creative spirit. I can understand that because if there are things that you wrote yourself that you don't exactly remember or you don't remember them that way, so yes, I will read the novel from beginning to end. Also, while I'm working on memory in the wine.
I love that. I love that you because that line has been kind of the tagline. It's on
Yes.
the box. So you're looking at it like that's a great line.
It's the truth. If I known I'd written it, I might have been a little bit more humble. Anyway, yeah.
CJ wants to know which is your favorite and least favorite sister in the
Ah,
novel.
okay. So favorite sister is Chata because she's the one who helps Inés, and she ends up helping with the kids, and she kind of wants to have a nice relationship with her. Least favorite, believe it or not,
Mm,
someone might think it's Isabel, but it's actually Rosa.
Rosa.
Yeah, because Isabel, I mean, Isabel, that's what she does. We're not going to give anything away. I mean, I'm not saying it's I'm not approving of it,
Uh-huh.
but I think Rosa is the one who could have actually really helped, and it's the judgmental. It's the
Yeah.
judgment. It's
Yes.
the pointing the finger that I find incredibly annoying.
Yeah, I think that there, like with Isabel, there's almost sort of like a clean break. There's like a crossing of a line that is so extreme that is like very, cut and dry. It's very
Right.
black and white. But with Rosa, she's like lingering and like
Yeah.
judging. There's like
Yeah.
there's a way that like staying in someone's life and still being kind of judgmental and detrimental, like that almost hurts more than like, the full.
Exactly, and we all have people like Rosa in our lives, unfortunately. Like voices that we carry that, oh, you shouldn't do that, and that's not the
Mhm.
right thing. Why are you doing that? You should know better, or whatever. But don't worry, Inés takes care of Rosa in the second book.
You're
He
selling more and
doesn't
more
kill.
copies. She doesn't kill her.
He doesn't. There's no murders.
This is a thriller. Everybody loves Chata. Rosa is my enemy. It's on
Ah,
site with Rosa. Okay. I pitied Isabel, someone said.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Another
Me
question.
too. Me too.
Wait, one more question. What is your dating daily writing ritual? Do you have one? Are you a write every day kind of person?
I try. I
Okay.
try. It's my ambition. Although I don't always get to do it. So the morning is the magical time for me.
Okay.
So first thing I do is I meditate because with all these crazy characters, I need to calm down before I write about them.
You need to find your peace.
Otherwise, it's like by 10 o'clock, I'm pulling my hair out. No, no. But in all seriousness, I meditate, and then I have to have a cup of coffee or two,
Mm,
uh, and after that, it's fine. Eat a little breakfast, and then that's the magical time for me to write. Now I've also written in the afternoons and so on, but my daily ritual, ideally, is after I wake up, meditate and have coffee, write a couple of hours, and then the rest of my day.
yeah. Well, how, that's kind of your present ritual. How has that changed? Like, how were you writing when you were raising kids and working full time? Was it like, still a ritual, or were you just kind of writing where you could?
Where I could, when I could,
Mhm.
how I could. I mean, it was every time I had a little office where we used to live before, and I'd go in there and I'd sit down and I start, write as much as I can for the amount of time that I have. So it was balancing and many things, which is part of the reason that I so much love this novel, because
Mhm.
there were blood, sweat, and tears went into the writing of it and the finishing of it, and of course thinking that I was finished. Oh, I'm done. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, I'm done. It's ready. And no, 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 there's more to do. The
Yeah.
whole process. So it was very difficult. I just, whenever I could, I just took the time, whether it was half an hour, and I sat down and I wrote. But I always had the story. I knew the story that I wanted to tell. Now, obviously, like your writers know, the story begins one way, and if you let your characters speak and if you listen, it changes, right?
Yeah.
It ends a different way. But I knew the story I wanted to tell, so anytime I could write, I did.
Great. Amazing. Well, I think that I don't see any more questions in the chat. If you have any more, I'm happy to take them. But that's also all of the questions that I had for you today. I just wanted to make sure that we had this time to celebrate this beautiful work being out in the world. I think I told you before we started. I went to my Barnes and Noble today just to see if they had it, and I found they had a copy. And then I was like, I don't know, should I leave the copy here? I bought it.
Good girl.
uh,
Brilliant.
yeah, yeah. I was like, no, I gotta buy it. So it was so cool to be able to like walk up. And then I gave the book to the bookseller, and she was like, "Oh, what a beautiful cover!" And I said, "Thank you." And then I realized how weird that was, because like if I were just a regular reader, like I wouldn't say thank you. So I was like, actually, it's like I showed her. I was like, "Oh, it's my imprint," and so we had a little conversation about it. So it was nice. But it was really a great moment to be able to walk into a bookstore and see Orange
Oh,
Wine.
yes.
So
Yes.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you.
Uh, so I think that's it. We'll wrap it up here. I know some of you guys are going to be in New York for Bindery Con. We will be there as well to celebrate with all of the other authors who are releasing in the season with Bindery. Um, Thank you so much for your support so far. Everybody has been so wonderful.
Yes.
Esperanza has been tagged all day. I've been tagged all day in your pictures and your pre-orders and your book mail, and it just goes such a long way. At the end of the day, we got to live in our little happy bubble of like doing this project, making this work, having these discussions, and now we're in like the business side of it where we got to go sell copies.
Yeah, that's right.
So we appreciate you guys so much for helping us be able to do this work, requesting it from the library, pre-ordering or ordering from your local bookstores. All of that stuff is so important. So we appreciate you guys so much. And this is just the beginning for Orange Wine. Esperanza's manifesting big things. I'm
Yes.
manifesting big things. And I can't wait to see where the rest of the story goes and where the little journey for this goes. So thanks again, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.